small thought yesterday when I realized that what I called externalism, it's a state in which we let all the external things dictate what we should value, how we should live, and basically how to play out in the world. And in externalism, I guess I mean especially in conformity. And I'm suppose I'm remembering or reminding myself how to be the other part, those who live by an internal state, those that can let go of distractions in order to find treasures deep within, or to shut up the noise and what it means to be a whole person, and walking away and finding what it actually means without other people, without the external word that can define the meaning or the purpose of what I do. And in those states, I find at times, most of the times, deep wisdom. I gain insight. I gain my power back in ways that might not be logical, but it makes sense somewhere inside me. I've kind of asked myself, well, what do I really feel about those new choices I have? And it required me to truly examine what it's all sitting in. And it reminded me of a time where I was on a path of being a shaman, of being a healer, of being a guide, a way shower, a mentor. A time in which I've sacrificed a lot on the material world, but I gained a lot of wisdom, knowledge, healing abilities that if I was focused on the material world, I would probably have missed. And regardless of if it's something that should be accepted or not, if I like it about myself or maybe I don't, I guess it's part of what makes me whole, and accepting this part of my identity has created a new space for me to exist in, a space in which I no longer look for the external world to define my worth, or I'm no longer seeking rewards and validation, because I already feel them radiating inside me. Because by choosing the path of being a healer, I feel the truth of who I am. And that's the reward in itself. I feel more healed. If in a previous state I felt as there was always something lacking within me, and therefore I cannot be recognized as fully fledged on the healing path, I feel I don't lack anything. There is nothing missing or nothing wrong about me. I don't need to define my worth in external things or in anything, really. I feel that my worth is truly me. But I suppose that for most people that aren't exposed to ways outside conformity, the idea of alternative lifestyles or different ways of living is not as acceptable, which I guess I already said at some point that it takes courage to be different, because it means that you don't need to rely on others to validate your path, and you don't have to be accepted or understood by everyone, but you must understand those things about yourself. I mean, at some point, and you can change your mind or just open up to different perspectives, but at some point you recognize the truth of who you are, or at least you discover more parts of yourself, and it will then be part of your mission to truly accept and integrate them into your daily life. You don't carry them as a title, you make them part of your everyday. And with that complex situation, you realize that you are a complex being with many faces and many personalities and many aspects of you that come into fruition through different interactions and different experiences. But it's more about accepting all parts of yourself, truly, and getting to know them. Each and every one of them is a mission is in itself, because you might not know how much have you fractured. You might have not known how many splits you have created within yourself to be accepted, because you thought you had to do it to survive. And recently I had a conversation with someone. I gave him the message that he has a right to exist. And in a beautiful way, I guess I gave myself the same message, that I have the right to exist with every gift and every inborn ability that I have, or with every skill and knowledge that I've developed through this lifetime or another one, with anything that I feel that is the only way for me, or just one of the many ways that would take me to a better state within my being. I feel that in many ways, the reason why people hide behind material things or just externalism is a way of just pretending that the wounds and vulnerabilities don't exist, when in fact we all have parts of ourselves that are strong and parts that feels more vulnerable. And it's more about just accepting all of yourself, every single aspect of you, and claim it as your own. And that's where you truly step into greater empowerment, because you can only grow strong and whole if you're all of you. I feel that so many people hide behind externalism, and I say hide because eventually they just pretend to feel strong and valued, but internally they usually are scared and weak. There is something about them that lacks that inner state because they have externalized it. And no matter how much you have externally, you have to find a deeper sense of self-worth within you. It's truly about the fundamentals of inner state of self-worth, and not something that has to do with anyone else but you. As I mentioned in a previous video, hardships are a normal part of life. Yet the people we surround ourselves by are so important in understanding whether we're gonna grow from a hard experience or are we gonna spiral down. It's so important to surround ourselves by those individuals that lift our spirit and empower us to take greater actions and responsibilities for ourselves, instead of going in the path that might be comfortable or comforting, but in the long term is not going to sustain us. Moreover, in the long term, it's quite disempowering. And sometimes those comforting, nurturing guides that show up in our life are more of a mirror to test our strength and show us that we can choose that path, or we can choose to initiate and take action and follow our heart and follow our dreams and do the things that we find valuable and important, regardless of the hardships. It can be so easy to try to protect ourselves from taking risks because we feel that we have an excuse, we have a reason, we have some self-adopted mindset that can keep us in that state. Like if we have an explanation of why we are passive in response to something in our external world, then it makes sense. Then someone won't blame us. But we will still have to live with ourselves and with the truth about giving away our power when we could have chose to overcome our fears, push through regardless, overcome our self-doubts. And that's the hard thing. That's the hard thing to do. And I say because I know, I don't feel that any person who builds themselves up towards anything that is meaningful to them doesn't face the same hardships just as everyone else. But those are the people that choose to lift themselves and overcome their own limits and empower others to do the same instead of keeping the status quo just because it makes sense. Sometimes challenging ourselves as well as challenging the external world is a way of empowering both ourselves and others in our pursuits of creating a better world, in improving both ourselves and our society, in increasing the positive emotions of can do attitude rather than the despair and the depression that comes when we deal with hardships. It's okay to move through the wide view of emotions. It's okay to feel the lower emotions. I'm not gonna say that you are not allowed to have them, but it's about the ability to move forward from them, to process them and rise up, because otherwise it might just take over you. And that's the power of choice. That's the realization that in any circumstances in your life, you have a choice. You might not be responsible for everything and everyone around you, but when you step into a greater responsibility over yourself, over overcoming your own states of despair, of depression, when you choose to empower yourself, you naturally empower other people because they sense that awakening thing within you. And that means that you have to be essentially courageous enough to realize that everything that might be holding you back from getting up and getting your life is just fear. Whether it's fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of any sort of consequences, but you have to realize that depression is in itself a consequence.